Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I have a jaw-dropping story about a husband who discovered his wife's betrayal and the devastating fallout. My name is Connor, and when I look back on my 15-year marriage to Mandy, I can hardly believe how blonde I was. We met when we were just 19, young and reckless. She was a waitress at a diner near my college campus. I was a freshman with big dreams, but little direction. We clicked right away over late-night cups of coffee and conversations about music and movies. Before we even really knew each other, we had jumped into marriage and started a family. Our first child, Jacob, came along when we were 21. We were just kids ourselves, trying to raise a baby in a cramped studio apartment while finishing school. Money was tight as we balanced part-time jobs and classes. Mandy's parents had disowned her for getting pregnant out of wedlock, so we had no family to turn to. I worked as a bartender and Mandy waitress at night while our neighbor watched the baby. We argued a lot about how to make ends meet. Mandy wanted me to drop out and work full-time while she stayed home, but I was determined to finish my engineering degree. I thought we'd both have to work and make sacrifices if we were going to provide any kind of decent life for our son. Those years nearly tore us apart. If not for our love for Jacob, I don't know if we would have made it. By the time our daughter, Wendy, was born, we were 25. We had settled into an uneasy compromise. I had finally graduated and secured an entry-level job with a construction firm. Mandy continued waitressing part-time for the flexible hours and extra cash. We bought a small house in the country, thrilled to finally have space and a backyard for the kids. Those early years were filled with chaos, but also joy. I worked long hours as a junior site manager, often leaving before dawn for faraway construction sites. I cherished the weekends, spending sunny Saturdays in the yard, kicking a ball with Jacob and pushing Wendy on the swing set. On Sundays, we would go to the zoo or children's museum, making memories as a family. When I got home from work, I was exhausted. Mandy would have dinner ready, but sometimes I would go straight to bed afterwards, weary from being on my feet all day, yelling at contractors and troubleshooting problems on the work site. Mandy started hinting that she wanted to go back to school for interior design, but we couldn't afford full-time daycare. I told her to wait a few more years until the kids were both in school. I thought we were making it work. The kids were happy and healthy, and Mandy and I had settled into a comfortable routine. Well, at least that's the way it looked. Looking back now, I can see the signs were there all along. When the kids reached school age and Mandy started taking some classes, she began coming home later and later. She said it was group assignments, but I would call the school and no one had heard of any night classes. When I asked to see her syllabus, she got defensive and accused me of being controlling. Mandy started going out more too, claiming it was just mom's nights for wine and venting. Sometimes she didn't stumble home until midnight or later. When I complained that she needed to be up to get the kids on the school bus, she accused me of smothering her. I backed off, wanting to be supportive and not be the bad guy. I figured she was bored from working all the time or watching the kids when she was off work and needed to blow off some steam now and then. As the kids were getting older, the cracks in our marriage were becoming canyons. Mandy was still taking random night classes, but didn't seem interested in pursuing interior design anymore. We rarely spent time together, and when we did, we ended up arguing about money or childcare logistics. She was hanging out with single gal pals, going to clubs and coming back reeking of alcohol and cigarette smoke. I was smoking too, picking up the habit from the endless stress of job site emergencies. We slept in separate rooms by then and avoided each other as much as possible. I buried myself in work, thinking if I could just make foreman, then supervisor, it would smooth things over. Mandy continued going out more and more, not coming home until early morning some nights. I tried to shield the kids from it as best I could, but I know Jacob and Wendy sensed the tension simmering below the surface. Finally, one night, it all exploded. Mandy didn't come home at all. I sat up until the sun crept in, fury and dread churning in my gut. Around 5 a.m., she finally rolled in, reeking of alcohol and sweat, smeared makeup all over her face. When I demanded to know where she'd been, she burst out laughing. I was with my lover, Rick. We've been hooking up for months. You're such an idiot, Connor. This marriage is a joke." Her words hit me like a sucker punch as she rambled on about her boyfriend, Rick, how they'd been meeting for secret hookups in cheap motels, how he satisfied her in ways I never could. I felt sick. I wanted to scream and rage to demand answers, but the kids were asleep upstairs. So, I quietly told Mandy to pack a bag and get the fuck out. She left, still ranting and raving, slamming the door so hard the pictures on the wall shook. I sat stunned in the armchair. How could I have been so blind? The signs were all there, but I had ignored them, burying myself in work and the comfortable fiction of domestic life. I had lived a lot for years, right under my own roof. I didn't tell the kids right away. I let them get through the school week, trying to act normal, but inside I was reeling. On Friday afternoon, I finally sat Wendy and Jacob down. I broke the news about why their mom left, told them that their mom was having an affair with another man, and I asked her to leave. Jacob, now 15, turned red with fury. He immediately blamed Mandy, calling her a selfish cheat. He said he never wanted to speak to her again. Wendy, at 11, was more upset. She cried while I held her, huge heaving sobs racking her slender frame. I didn't have any words that could make it better. All I could do was hug my kids close while our little world crumbled around us. In the months after Mandy left, I tried to cling to stability for the kids. I made breakfast and dinner, checked homework, and held my tears in until I was alone. Jacob hardly reacted outwardly after that first day, sealing up his emotions, but I could tell he was broken-hearted. Wendy remained withdrawn and weepy. Whenever Mandy called, trying to explain herself or win the kids back, they refused to speak to her. I stopped answering her calls too. There was nothing left to say. The divorce proceedings were almost anticlimactic after the bomb that had blown our family apart. Mandy tried every manipulation in the book, but it was too late. She blamed me, saying I had ignored her needs. She claimed I drove her into the arms of another man by being boring and unsupportive. At one point, she even tried to say our marriage failed because of lack of intimacy after the kids were born. She tried to turn Wendy and Jacob against me, telling them lies about how controlling I was. None of her gaslighting worked. Once I knew the truth, I saw her schemes for what they were: desperate ploys from a woman unwilling to take responsibility for her own destructive choices. In the courtroom, Mandy tried to blame me again for all her cheating and negligent behavior, but I had proof now in the form of emails and receipts from her secret hotel stays, credit card bills for restaurants and vacations she had taken with her lover. I presented the evidence calmly, though inside I shook with anger at the injustice of it all. Mandy broke down weeping and pleading, but it was far too late for any of that. In the end, the judge clearly saw her for what she was: an unfaithful wife and absent mother. Jacob had chosen to stay with me rather than his mother, but I couldn't get primary custody of Wendy. She was only 11 at the time, and we went 50-50 custody. That painful chapter closed over a year ago. The kids and I have slowly begun to heal. Jacob is still closed off emotionally and wants little to do with his mother. Their relationship may always be strained. Wendy, though, has found more acceptance. Once the initial shock and hurt faded, she realized she still needed her mom in her life on some level. They would occasionally go for a meal or shopping trip. I know Wendy's kindness will be a gift in mending that broken bond, and I will support her no matter what, just as I've supported both kids through this life-changing ordeal. As for me, the past year has been about rebuilding myself, my relationship with my kids, my sense of world. For over a decade, I believed one thing when the truth was something far more painful. Such a massive deception can corrode your very foundation, but I've also found unexpected sources of hope and joy where I least expected it. Her name is Marlene. I met her 6 months ago on a new construction project for luxury condos downtown. Marlene is a real estate agent. She is sometimes hired to style and stage the model units. I was immediately struck by her quick mind and kind spirit, so different from the turmoil I'd become used to at home. We started spending our site meeting coffee breaks together, chatting about life and work, then a drink after work turned into dinner. Before I knew it, we were spending every spare moment together. There was no lightning bolt moment of falling in love, Just a steady warmth and rightness, like I had found a missing piece I didn't know was gone. Her presence soothed me, her laughter healed something. When I finally told the kids I had met someone, they were understandably weary. Their own mother had just ripped our family in two. How could they ever trust another woman entering our lives? But when they met Marlene, her gentle caring melted their doubts. She makes me feel alive again after years of just going through the motions. When we are together, I remember what a real partnership feels like. Knowing someone has your back, supports your dreams, wants to share the journey. I know we'll take it slow for the kids' sake, but I can picture a future with Marlene now, a chance to rebuild my life into something beautiful again. The path ahead has its challenges. I still have moments of grief and anger over Mandy's betrayal that catch me unprepared. My relationship with Jacob remains tentative. We are both wary of trusting too much again too soon, but rebuilding takes time and all things grow stronger with care. What Mandy broke, Marlene and I commend. When I look back now on my failed marriage, part of me is sad for the naive boy I was who believed in happily ever after, but mostly I feel grateful. Grateful for second chances, grateful for my strong children who have stood by me through the hardest year of our lives, and grateful for Marlene, a woman whose love and light has lifted the shadows of the past. I don't know if I'll ever marry again. For now, I am focused on writing a new story one day at a time. It won't be perfect or predictable, but it will be real. My marriage to Mandy nearly broke me, but now my life is filled with hope once more. Hard-won wisdom as a way of illuminating your path, help you move forward. And while the future is uncertain, I look ahead with an open heart, determined to appreciate every moment. Well, in my opinion, the fact that she told him that she was with the lover, wow, blatant disrespect for the marriage and the kids. People don't ever put up with shit like that ever. If you do, it shows a sign of weakness, and you will be walked over all the time. Don't do it. Remember, don't ever let someone make a fool out of you. If you found this story gripping, please like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible tales. Hit the bell icon to get notified whenever we post a new story. Until next time, Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm sharing an intense story about a husband's heartbreaking discovery of his wife's double life and the fallout that followed. My wife Annette is 47 and I am 48. I am the proud owner of a flourishing computer company, a beacon of success in this competitive market. Our two kids, Malcolm, he is 17, and Betty, she is 16, are top-notch students with bright futures. Annette, my stunning wife, never fails to turn heads when she walks into a room. Our family, by all accounts, appears to be the perfect blend of success, love, and prosperity. But as I'm beginning to learn what's on the surface, doesn't always reflect the truth. The changes were slight. Initially, Annette, a renowned interior designer, started coming home later than usual, her reasons ranging from sudden client meetings to spontaneous dinners with colleagues. Then there were the secretive phone conversations she'd have behind closed doors. On top of that, there were times when she would mysteriously disappear during the day, only to reappear with casual justifications of spontaneous gym visits or shopping sprees. An unsettling sensation began to creep into my mind, suggesting that these pieces didn't fit together as neatly as she portrayed. I often turned to Jack, a stalwart friend from my college days, and now a successful attorney, during our regular catch-ups at a local bar. As my worries grew and my suspicions became more frequent, Jack became a sounding board for my concerns. He argued that it was likely just stress from Annette's work or our shared parental responsibilities. I learned to trust his rational explanations, but the nagging doubt persisted, refusing to be ignored. Fast forward a few weeks, the changes in Annette's behavior grow more conspicuous. There's a notable increase in late-night work sessions and the proliferation of whispered phone calls, all causing my initial suspicion to blossom into full-blown concern. My trust begins to waver big time as I am plagued by restless nights and questions that refuse to be silenced. With my suspicions growing, I resort to recording these instances in a private journal. This diary of mistrust lists the dates, the time she arrived home, the frequent yet vague excuses, and the countless calls she took out of my earshot. It becomes a cold testament to my mounting apprehension. The numbers stark on the pages don't lie, and the frequency of these odd instances strengthens the case of my suspicions. After much deliberation, I confront Annette one evening when the kids are away spending a weekend with some friends. I'm careful with my words, pointing out the changes in our schedule, the secretive phone calls, and the unexplained absences. She laughs it off, saying I'm overthinking and that it's just the demands of her job. She assures me that I'm imagining things, blaming it on my work-related stress, and subtly suggesting I might be paranoid. Her casual dismissal stings, but it's the ease with which she lies that alarms me the most. She wraps up the conversation with a swift kiss on my cheek, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the persisting question, am I paranoid or is she really hiding something? One afternoon, I called Jack over to my office away from the chaos of family life. I spill out my doubts, my fears, and my findings from the journal. After Jack listens to me, he then says, have you considered hiring a private investigator? The suggestion, though unexpected, isn't dismissed. Jack argues it might be the best way to put my doubts to rest once and for all. After a long moment of contemplation, I realize that I have reached a juncture where this feels like a viable option. It might give me solid answers and, with any luck, put an end to the suspicion corroding my peace of mind. After Jack leaves my office, I immediately do some research on private investigators and make an appointment. I had the investigator start his work immediately and in silence. The private investigator didn't communicate with me for weeks. Then one afternoon, a manila envelope is left at my office. Inside, the private investigator's report reveals a pattern of unaccounted hours and secret meetings with the man who I have never seen before. The pages document late-night encounters and daytime rendezvous, painting a grim picture. It feels like reading a twisted detective novel. Only I am the oblivious character and clueless. As I leaf through the documents, I stumble upon photographs. There in black and white is Annette with a stranger. They're seen dining at a hidden-away restaurant, walking through a secluded park, and laughing in a coffee shop. Each picture feels like a physical blow. Despite the mounting evidence, there's no undeniable proof of betrayal. No image showing them in a compromising situation. The line between friendship and something more seems blurred, casting an even darker shadow of uncertainty. I called Jack. The photo spread across my desk. His voice resonates with concern. When I tell him about the investigator's report, he urges me to hold on, to not jump to conclusions. He reminds me that suspicions, even with suggestive evidence, is not solid proof. As much as his words ring with reason, they do little to calm the turmoil within me. His advice for patience is a bitter pill to swallow. Nonetheless, I cling to it, deciding to see the investigation through to the end, no matter how unsettling the unfolding narrative may be. About another 2 weeks pass, and the private investigator calls me in for a meeting. He slides another manila envelope over to me. Inside were photos of them kissing, meetings at a hotel, meetings at his house. While his wife was away, this man had a wife. The investigator said on one occasion, when his wife left, apparently his wife travels for work. My wife showed up 10 minutes later to his house. After meeting the private investigator, I called Jack and asked him to meet me at the bar we frequent. When he got there, I showed him everything. His exact words were, "Man, I am so sorry." Then he asked me, what was I planning to do? I basically told him we're finished. I can't trust her anymore. She lied to my face. When I first told her about my concerns, since Jack was a personal injury lawyer, he gave me the contact information for a good divorce lawyer in our area. The next morning, I called the divorce attorney and gave her all the information the private investigator gathered. I haven't said anything to the kids or my wife. I had the divorce attorney file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity. Now I had the task of informing the other betrayed spouse, but I didn't want her husband to find out. I didn't know where she worked or what her travel schedule was. In the meantime, I started cleaning up my finances. My wife has access to 3 of my credit cards. 2 of them had hefty balances exceeding $10,000 each. I immediately closed the 2 credit cards and kept the other one open, but I removed her as an authorized user. We had 3 bank accounts. I opened 2 accounts at another bank and started moving money over to one of them. I removed my wife from my life insurance policy. While all this was taking place, I asked the private investigator, could he inform me when the other betrayed spouse returned? And he agreed to inform me when this guy's wife came back. Meanwhile, I had to grapple with the unfortunate duty of informing the kids. But I just couldn't tell them. I didn't have the guts to. In a strange turn of events, my wife had to take a business trip that was going to last a few days. And I didn't even take her to the airport. The next day I took off from work. I had to catch up on some work at home. When both of my kids came into our home office, Malcolm and Betty were both crying. Then they told me what I was afraid to tell them. They told me that their mother was messing around on me and they didn't know how to tell me. I told them I already knew. We started piecing together timelines. Turns out the kids knew a couple of months before I did, but I wasn't mad at them. I would imagine it would be tough to tell someone news like that. Well, fast forward a few days and my wife gets back. When she gets home, all her stuff is packed. Copies of all the information that private investigator compiled is sitting on top of her stuff. I immediately told her it's best you leave as soon as you can. This woman pulled out her phone and made a call. Within an hour, she was gone with all of her clothes and other belongings. The kids right now don't have anything to do with her. About 3 weeks later, the private investigator told me that the other betrayed spouse was back. That's when I sprang into action. I went and made copies of everything the private investigator compiled. I went to the address that he gave me, waited about an hour. When I saw the opportunity, I ran up to the door, rang the doorbell. When she answered, all I said was, "This is for you," and left. Fast forward a few days, I get a call from my attorney and he tells me that my wife was served with the divorce papers at her job. 6 weeks later, the divorce hearing was upon us. My soon-to-be ex-wife didn't look like the same woman a month ago. She didn't even look at me at the divorce hearing. My wife had her own lawyer. She was silent the whole time. In the end, she didn't get anything except she will receive 50% of the equity in our home. When it's sold, we agreed through the lawyers that neither of us would seek alimony. I made enough to support myself and the kids. I didn't need anything from her. As far as the kids' living arrangements, they still didn't want anything to do with their mother. The kids are teenagers, so there was no need for a custody battle. After the divorce, my ex-wife had someone come over and get the rest of her things. And my ex-wife has not interacted with the kids since before the divorce. The other betrayed spouse and I ended up talking on the phone extensively. She has 2 kids and 1 kid is autistic. She has also filed for divorce and kicked her husband out of the house. She also told me that her husband has stopped seeing my ex-wife. My kids and I will be fine, but I told the kids, even though their mom and I are not together, try not to hold a grudge forever. Both of my kids said they don't know if they can forgive their mom. Well, no time soon anyway. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful tales. Hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. Until next time, stay strong.
Hey everyone! Welcome back to the channel. Today, I have a jaw-dropping story about a husband who uncovered his wife's betrayal and revealed everything at her best friend's wedding. Here was another one of these crazy cheating stories, but she cheated on him after 15 years. He did a grand reveal at her friend's wedding. This is someone I met at the gym I go to. Let's see if this story gets stolen. We all know where this story originated from, Tony's cheating stories. I am Malcolm, and for 15 long years Charlene and I have been a strong couple. We've navigated through financial hardships, health scares, and all the challenges that come with raising 2 kids. Our home is more than just a house. It's a sanctuary filled with love, laughter, and memories. I mean, we've got the whole 9 yards: summer vacations, family game nights, and even those cheesy matching holiday sweaters. You get the picture. It seemed like we had it all figured out. Now Charlene has this best friend, Rachel. They've been inseparable since college, sorority sisters, bridesmaids at each other's weddings, the whole deal. So when Rachel dropped the news that she was tying the knot, it was a big deal for Charlene. She was thrilled not just for her friend but also for herself. After all, a bachelorette party is a great excuse for a girls' night out, something Charlene hadn't had in a while. Rachel planned to have her bachelorette party at a swanky downtown hotel, complete with a spa day, a fancy dinner, and a night of dancing. Charlene was buzzing with excitement. Weeks before the event, She went shopping for the perfect outfit, booked a salon appointment, and even started a group chat with the other attendees to plan some surprises for Rachel. I was genuinely happy for her. She deserved a break from her routine, but here's where things started to get interesting. As the date of the bachelorette party approached, I noticed subtle changes in Charlene's behavior. She seemed a bit more preoccupied than usual, frequently lost in thought. She was spending more time on her phone, giggling at messages that she quickly swiped away. When I walked into the room, I didn't think much of it at first. After all, she was planning a big event. But something in my gut told me that these were not just innocent pre-party jitters. And as it turns out, my intuition was spot on, but I wouldn't find that out until much later. The day of the party finally arrived and the atmosphere in our home was electric. Charlene spent hours getting ready, meticulously applying her makeup and styling her hair. When she finally descended the stairs, she looked like she stepped out of a fashion magazine. She gave me a long kiss and assured me she'd be careful and try not to stay out too late. The kids and I had a blast, but as the night wore on, I found myself checking the clock more frequently. Finally, around 2:30 a.m., I heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. Charlene was back. She looked radiant but also somewhat distant. She said the party was amazing, showed me a few photos and then claimed she was wiped out. She headed straight for the bedroom. In the days following the bachelorette party, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in our relationship. Charlene was physically present, but emotionally, it felt like she was miles away. Initially, I attributed it to exhaustion. After all, she had a long night of partying. But as the days turned into weeks, it became increasingly clear that something wasn't right. The first major red flag was her sudden obsession with her phone. Charlene had always been casual about her phone. She'd leave it lying around the house, sometimes even forgetting where she placed it. But now it was as if the device had become an extension of herself. She changed her passcode, one that she didn't share with me, and started taking her phone everywhere. I mean, she'd even carry it with her to the bathroom, something she had never done before. Then came the late nights at work. Charlene had a 9-to-5 job and was always home by dinner time. It was one of the things I admired about her. She was committed to spending quality time with the family. But suddenly she was swamped with urgent projects and critical meetings that required her to stay late. The first time it happened, I thought nothing of it. Work pressures catch up with everyone. But when it became a pattern, my head was screaming red alert. Adding to my growing concern was her change in routine. Charlene had always been a creature of habit. She had her favorite spots on the couch, her preferred morning coffee blend, and even her go-to playlist for cleaning. But now she was switching things up. She started listening to different music, took up jogging, something she had always claimed to despise, and even changed her diet. It was as if she was trying to become a different person. And let's not forget the mysterious new friend at work. She mentioned him casually in a conversation, saying they were collaborating on a project. But the way she spoke his name with a sort of guarded curiosity made me wonder if there was more to the story. Each of these red flags on its own might not have meant much, but together they painted a picture that I couldn't ignore. It was a mosaic of warning signs. The feeling that something was off had turned into a full-blown suspicion. I knew I had to get to the bottom of it, not just for my peace of mind but for the sake of our family. So, I decided to do some investigative work, as much as I hated the idea of snooping. The first clue came when I was using our shared iPad to look up some recipes. Charlene and I had always been open about our devices up until recently. But to my surprise, she didn't put a password on the iPad. As I was scrolling through the apps, I stumbled upon one that looked like it had a lock on it. It was cleverly disguised as a utility app, something you use for maybe news feeds or something else, but something about it seemed out of place. Curiosity got the better of me and I opened the app. What I found was a vault, a hidden space designed to keep messages, photos, and other files away from prying eyes. That's when I felt my heart beating a little faster as I realized that the app was linked to Charlene's phone. I hesitated for a moment, wrestling with the ethics of what I was about to do, but ultimately the need for the truth won out. I entered the vault and what I discovered was a bombshell. There were text messages, explicit photos, and even voice notes, all confirming the terrible truth. Charlene had cheated on me before, and during the bachelorette party. The messages were not just flirtatious. They were intimate, detailing encounters and future plans. The sender was this mysterious friend from work. She had casually mentioned, as I sat there staring at the screen in a daze, I really couldn't believe what I was seeing for a moment. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My world had been turned upside down, and the person responsible was the one I had trusted the most. But as the initial shock began to subside, another feeling took his place. I started to get angry. I gave this damn woman the world. I took screenshots of everything, sent them to my secure email, and then deleted any trace of my activity on the iPad. The revelation was hard to swallow, but I knew that losing my composure wouldn't help. It had to be strategic, calculated, and above all discreet. The first was to consult a legal expert. I scheduled a meeting with a top-notch divorce attorney. I had to find this out on my own. I wasn't going to reach out to any family members or friends to get recommendations because they would probably say something to my wife. When I found an attorney, I presented all the evidence I had gathered, ensuring that I had a solid case should things escalate to that point. Next, I took a hard look at our financial situation. I started transferring assets into accounts solely under my name, ensuring that I had a financial safety net. I also made copies of all important documents, bank statements, property deeds, and even our kids' school records. I left no stone unturned, but the most crucial part of my plan was the timing. I needed a moment so impactful that it would leave a permanent mark, a moment that Charlene would never forget. And what better occasion than Rachel's wedding? It was the perfect setting, a gathering of close friends and family, an atmosphere of love and commitment, the ultimate irony given the circumstances. As the wedding day approached, I played the role of the doting husband to perfection. I even went with Charlene to pick out her bridesmaid's dress, complimenting her on how beautiful she looked. I wanted to give her a false sense of security to make her believe that everything was as it should be. All the while, my plan was crystallizing in my mind, each detail meticulously thought out. I knew that the wedding would have a segment for speeches and toast. Traditionally, these were heartfelt messages wishing the newlyweds a lifetime of happiness, but for me, it would serve a different purpose. It would be the stage for my grand reveal, the moment when I would expose Charlene's betrayal in front of everyone who mattered to her. As the days counted down to the wedding, I rehearsed my speech multiple times, choosing my words carefully. I wanted it to be impactful yet dignified, a reflection of the gravity of the situation. I even confided in a trusted friend to ensure that I would be given the opportunity to speak during the wedding. Everything was falling into place. The day of Rachel's wedding arrived and the atmosphere was electric with excitement and celebration. Charlene, dressed in her bridesmaid gown, looked radiant. She had no idea that the day would be anything other than a joyful celebration of love and commitment. I wore a tailored suit, looking every bit the proud husband. We smiled for photos, danced a little, and mingled with guests to anyone watching. We were the picture of marital bliss, but beneath the surface, my plan was ready to be set into motion. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with heartfelt vows and emotional moments. As Rachel and her new husband exchanged rings, I couldn't help but think about the vows Charlene and I had once made to each other, vows that she had broken. Finally, the reception began. Guests were ushered into a grand hall adorned with elegant decorations. The atmosphere was festive with the live band playing and people laughing, toasting, and enjoying themselves. It was a perfect setting for what I was about to do. As the evening progressed, the time for speeches and toasts arrived. Friends and family took turns sharing well wishes for the newlyweds. I had coordinated with the MC earlier, ensuring that I would have a slot to speak. My heart was starting to beat faster as I waited for my turn, rehearsing my words one last time in my head. Finally, the MC announced my name. I took a deep breath and walked up to the microphone, looking at Charlene for just a moment, but she wasn't paying attention. I started by offering heartfelt congratulations to Rachel and her husband, wishing them a lifetime of happiness and love. The crowd applauded and I paused for a moment, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. Then I shifted gears. I looked directly at Charlene, who was seated at a table with other bridesmaids, and began the next part of my speech. Charlene looked like she was confused a little. Well, she was about to be unconfused. Charlene, we've been husband and wife for 15 years. We've built a life, a family, and a home together. But what you're not aware of is that the past 3 months, I've been living with a devastating truth. I've discovered your affair. I continued, letting each word hang in the air for a moment before moving on. I've gathered evidence, consulted legal professionals, and prepared myself for the life-altering changes that are about to come. I have here, I said, pulling a sealed envelope from my jacket pocket, divorce papers that are fully prepared and only require your signature. You have 2 options. You can sign them right here, right now, in front of everyone, or you can wait and I'll have them formally served to you. The choice is yours. Everything went dead silent. Everyone started looking at Charlene. Charlene sat there, visibly stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment, she looked like she was going to speak, but she didn't say anything. She glanced around the room, perhaps searching for some form of support or understanding, but was met with a sea of shocked faces, realizing the gravity of the situation. She took the envelope from my hand, opened it, and without saying a word, signed the divorce papers right there at the table. In the weeks that followed, the divorce proceedings moved swiftly, Thanks in part to the irrefutable evidence I had gathered, the court granted me full custody of our children, acknowledging that their well-being was best served in a stable environment, away from the tumultuous relationship their mother had engaged in. I retained ownership of our family home, ensuring that the kids would have a sense of continuity and security. As for Charlene, she was left to grapple with the consequences of her actions. She moved into a small apartment, her reputation tarnished, not just within our circle of friends, but also in her professional life. The mysterious friend from work, he was transferred to another department, and their so-called relationship fizzled out, leaving Charlene with nothing but a guilt and shame to keep her company. I just went through this less than a year ago. I tell most of my friends today that are contemplating marriage, just because you have been married for a long time, doesn't mean you know your partner 100%. Oh, I do let my ex-wife take the kids and spend time with their mother. Even though I have full custody, I still want the kids to have a relationship with their mother. If you were captivated by this story, please like, comment, and subscribe for more unbelievable tales. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. Until next time.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I have a heart-wrenching story about a husband whose 7-year marriage was shattered by his wife's shocking betrayal and the devastating aftermath. I want to personally thank one of our listeners for sharing this story with us. This is his personal story. This video is long, so hopefully you have some time to devote to it. I have read many stories about infidelity, and there are some definite heartbreaking stories that sadden me to read them or hear about them. My story is also pretty sad, but I do not think that I am able to convey the same level of bitterness and betrayal that some of the other writers and submitters have experienced. My story, of course, is sad, but also perhaps gives a different perspective that might be worth listening to. I am not sure why I am writing about events that took place so many years ago, but maybe it is just a way to show people that good things happen with time. And time and patience does seem to heal most things. I met my wife, and we were together for almost 10 years, which includes 7 years of marriage. We have 2 children who are now fully grown and have lives of their own. My wife and I met on a blind date, and it was awkward the entire night. My wife is an attractive woman with a vivacious personality. Me, on the other hand, am somewhat reserved and would not probably be considered as a head-turner. I am not that bad on the eyes, but do not in any way claim to be a great heartbreaker. I am also on the quiet side, and my wife has always been the person that people noticed at a party or an event. She also has a kind heart and is very empathetic to people and always looks for the good. Strangely enough, she seemed to like me and our relationship grew. Finally, we got married and began to build our life together. Our life was actually going very well. We had a nice home, good finances, supportive families, good friends, and our kids were doing well. But, as with many of these stories, there is a catalyst that can change everything. Our catalyst was a pregnancy. We had 2 young kids at the time and wanted to go for a 3rd child to have an even larger and happier family. We never had too many concerns in the bedroom, and we quickly had number 3 on the way. I was elated when my wife told me the news, and we waited about 3 months before we told the rest of our families about the new addition. During the next 3 months, we were busy with planning for the nursery, working with our kids on getting ready for the new baby, looking at finances. It is perhaps the saddest day of my life when my wife called me to tell me that something is wrong with the baby. We got her to the hospital, and unfortunately and tragically my wife had a miscarriage at the 6-month mark. We were both traumatized, and the trip back home next day was absolute silence and sadness. My wife went to bed that night and did not come out of that room for the next 3 days. She was absolutely overcome with sadness and depression. For some reason, she also believed that she had failed me as my wife. I told her again and again that this was an act of God. She did not do anything wrong, and we could try again when the time was right, but she did not believe me and continued to blame herself for the whole situation and sunk into a depression. It took about 6 months, but she appeared to be coming out of her funk and seemed to be getting back to her normal self. We were both doing well with the kids. She seemed to have her personality back, and we were talking about the future. She also started to exercise and get back into shape. She really did look incredible, and I did enjoy giving her compliments and telling her how much I loved her. During this time, she also talked to me about getting a part-time job. It was not so much about the money, but more of a way for her to get out of the house and stay involved. I told her that was a great idea and encouraged her to think about what she wanted to do and to go for it. To my surprise, she got a job as a waitress and bartender at a restaurant right down the street from us. She has a degree in business, but did not want to get a white-collar job. She thought the hours and responsibilities would be too much with our home and family, but this would get her up and moving. She would be able to earn some money for herself. The hours would work well and feel like she was contributing. Plus, she said that she needed to work and talk with adults, and she felt this would get her out of her isolation at home. Once again, I told her that was great news and she should go for it. Now, I noted earlier that my wife is an attractive woman, but I should also add that she is a voluptuous woman and was looking really great with her level of fitness and weight loss. She has never had a problem with attracting interest from men, but she also has always been loyal to me and I never had reason to doubt her. She started her job and was doing well. She worked 3 nights per week and usually worked on a Friday or one day on the weekend. I was somewhat uncomfortable with her work outfits because she wore clothing that accentuated her figure and showed more than I liked to see. It was tasteful, but I admit that I wished she would be more conservative. She laughed at me on this and told me it was a great way to bring in more tips and perhaps her outfits would spur more romantic interest on my part. The owner of the restaurant was a good man and ran a good business. He was fair with his workers and his family also all worked there. His son, to be honest, was somewhat of an arrogant jerk. He had been born into wealth and made no bones about living a nice lifestyle. He was about the same age as my wife, and I must admit, he was a very good-looking guy. He was married but had no children yet. His wife is a lovely and wonderful person also. She also worked at the restaurant and handled the books. The son handled all the catering and special events. At least he was supposed to do that. My understanding is that he was somewhat lazy and constantly dumped his responsibilities off on his family and coworkers. What he really liked to do was lift weights, work out, drive around in his fancy car, mooch off his family, and basically talk and brag about how great he was with women. I am not sure how his wife dealt with all of this. He was admittedly a flashy guy, but the guy did not impress me in the least. I could tell from the first time I met him that he was not much more than a big-mouth windbag. My wife had commented to me several times that the guy was very good-looking in an exciting way, but he was an arrogant toe rag and she could not stand him, but she had to work with him and kept her mouth shut to get along. She did work with him on a consistent basis, and they then began to have some type of friendship forming. I was not overly concerned, but did tell her that this guy was trouble and she should be careful around him since I thought he was nothing but trouble. During the next several months, my wife did begin to act peculiar. She kept a close eye on her phone, claimed she had to work late, and began to be absent for long periods of time, claiming that she was shopping or running errands. She also began to ignore me to some extent. And I also thought she was not as attentive to the kids as she had been in the past. My wife is a good mother, but she seemed to be impatient at this time with the whole family and had no concern with turning over more of the responsibilities to me. It was a challenge since I also work full-time and am the primary breadwinner of the family. I did tell her of my concern, but she told me things were going okay and I was seeing problems where there were not any. One night, my wife and I were alone and it was late. I made a move on her and she shut me down cold. I asked her what the problem was, and with that, she started crying and shaking. I asked her again what the problem was and then received the shock of my life. My wife told she had been seeing the owner's son for almost 6 months. The relationship had turned sexual. She loved him, we were done, and she was going to leave me to move in with him. She also told me that she had been deeply unhappy since the miscarriage and felt that something in our marriage had died. She needed a fresh start, and she needed to be free to live her life. She also told me that she loved this guy, and he could make her happy. I was obviously pretty shook up, and asked her to reconsider. She told me it was too late for that, and would be moving in with her new boyfriend into an apartment they had secured. I asked her about the kids, and she told me that it would be best if they stayed with me in the house to maintain a good home, and she would be there to see them. It is an understatement to say that I was absolutely shocked and flabbergasted at what had taken place. My wife told me that she did not understand the surprise since she thought I was well aware of her unhappiness with our marriage, and the miscarriage had been the final nail in the proverbial coffin. I was not pleased when I learned who she had a relationship with. It is one thing to get the complete shafting from your wife, and another to find out she was ditching you for a guy who is really a dirtbag. I do not want to make a generality, but there does seem to be some truth that so many women are attracted to guys like this. I am not sure if it was his looks, flashy lifestyle, his big, stupid, arrogant mouth, or maybe something else I did not like to think about, but she apparently was interested in him, and it took off from there. I was very hurt when I found out later that it was my wife who put the moves on him and started the whole relationship. I was also shocked that she had been involved with him for almost 6 months, without my knowing. They apparently had been having sex in his car, the restaurant, hotels, his house, our home when nobody was there. It was a real betrayal and I was deeply hurt, but I thought about what I would do and maintained my perspective and composure. What followed was basically several weeks of tears, sadness, cajoling, and really just a whole lot of crap. Being the lunatic engineer that I am, I spent an entire weekend putting together a matrix and chart of my different options and the consequences of each option. I then put together a numerical assessment of my options to come up with what I thought was the best plan. It was absolutely wacky and devoid of any normal human response. Strangely enough, thinking rationally and having a plan did show me what I saw as the best plan moving forward. My family, and especially my dad, was furious and began saying terrible things about her. My wife's side of the family was also upset with the situation, but obviously did not display the same level of animosity and bitterness that my side did. Her parents were fine to me, but they did make every effort to support and help their daughter, which I understood. But I then actually had to intervene with my father and ask him to stop with the vitriolic insults against my wife. She was still the mother of his son's children, and he needed to show her respect as a grandfather. My father actually agreed and commended me on my approach to this whole situation. I told him that I did not believe there was any benefit for me by seeking revenge on my soon-to-be ex-wife. She was the mother of my children, and I would need to have an amicable relationship with her for the sake of our kids. Do not get me wrong, I would have loved to be an SOB, but thought long and hard about it. I think that I made the correct choice and in retrospect would have done the same thing. As I said, it was a rough couple of weeks, but she did move out and into an apartment with this guy. She did see her children and tried to be active in their lives. I also felt terrible for the wife of this guy, and she was mortified by what had taken place. She did leave the restaurant to get another job and did file for divorce. I would see her in the local grocery store on occasion and always wished her well. She was originally from Pennsylvania and eventually moved back to her home. I understand she did get remarried to a solid man and now has a good life and children. I wish her only the best. There is no question in my mind that her splitting with this guy is the best thing that ever happened to her. I did lose my temper one time, and it was due to that stupid phone my wife had. My wife never saw me get really upset. I kept my cool, and she did not see this incident. We had gotten a flip phone. They were very new at that time and cost a bundle. We paid for that dumb phone, and at the time I did not even know how to use it. She told me that it was for safety and security, but the reality was she wanted it to her new chum. One time I heard it ringing right when she first told me she wanted out, and I tossed it on the floor when she left the room. The darn thing pretty much was destroyed and I tossed it out. I pled no knowledge of where it was. My wife looked for that dumb thing for 2 days and then decided she had lost it. The divorce itself went smoothly. She did get some money out of me due to the division of assets. I did agree to pay some alimony support for a short period of time, which I think ended at 1 year, or maybe it was 15, 18 months. To me, it was a cheap way to get out of the situation. In fact, I probably would have agreed to any financial demands she would have made in order to be done with the situation. I was retained as the primary custodial parent, and she had 50-50 visitation. I told her that she was always free to stop and see her children. She did do that on many occasions and things appeared to be somewhat stable. I also think she liked to see me when she came to visit the kids, but maybe that was wishful thinking on my part. My wife did not make a lot of money, but did make a small child support payment each month. To her credit, she did her best and never missed a payment when it came to her children. In retrospect, there is no doubt in my mind that my wife was going through some type of personal crisis due to the miscarriage and the aftermath of it. I am not some great prize, but there is no way my wife in her right mind would have done what she did, but I was powerless and there was not much I could do. The day we signed the divorce papers to make it final was surreal. Things had been amicable, but it was still tough. We met at her attorney's office, and it was a sad affair for me. I was saddened that she seemed so happy about the situation, and she was there with her dirtbag boyfriend. She almost seemed giddy about it, which really shocked me. We had been together for many years and had a family together. This was the only time I ever felt like she disrespected me during the whole divorce, but I let it roll off because there was nothing left to prove. The marriage was over and we needed to move forward. When I signed the papers, I did see some regret in her eyes. I do think she had a look of shock on her face since I remember what I said to her. I had thought about it and had already decided what I was going to say. I must admit that I am proud of what I said and how well it came off. I am not an actor, but on this day, I did have a flair for the dramatic. I had written it down and practiced it until I had it down, and this is what I said, and I am of course sad about this. I thought we had a good life and were a good team. First, I need to apologize to you if you think I failed you. I was not able to bring you the happiness you wanted. I must have really failed you if you thought somebody else would give you a better chance at happiness than I could. I think that I did my best, but that was obviously not enough. I do think the miscarriage had a lot more to do with this than we realize. When tragedies take place, people either get closer and stronger, or there is separation and loss. I am sad and find it ironic that what should have been a happy experience for us is what I believe destroyed us in the end. But that is in the past now. I want you to have a happy life, and we can work together to give our kids the best and most stable life we can. The room was quiet when I said this. Her face looked stark white, and I think that I did see regret in her eyes. With that, I got up, shook her hand, wished her well, said goodbye, and her attorney told me he would send me a copy of the papers. Things went okay at first. She was living with this guy, but within several months, chinks began to appear in their relationship. He apparently drank too much, was pretty much shiftless, lived off his family, and really was not much of a man. He also apparently had a wandering eye and was already lighting up his next conquest. She was apparently a younger girl who worked in another restaurant, which was also owned by his father. Of interest, and perhaps a little strange, is that I continued to order food from the original establishment. The owner would always greet me when I came in for my order, and always had a look of welcome and friendship on his face. The food was great, and I always liked the pizza and lasagna. No way I was giving that up, and I drew a line in the sand when it came to good takeout. I knew the owner for years, and I would drive past his house all the time and always waved at him. I also saw him at the grocery store, around town, school, and sporting events because he would come to watch his grandkids also. I did not hang out in the restaurant. I would simply phone in my order and go to the takeout window. I would never stay in the place because that would have been awkward. My ex-wife was working there and was living with his son. If you toss in that he deserted his wife also. The owner was not pleased. He was a family man and told me once that he did not understand where he went wrong with his son. Of course, and to no surprise, things began to go downhill with this new exciting power couple. My ex-wife one time had referred to themselves that way, and I admit that it really irritated me. The power couple were now fighting all of the time and things were not going well for my ex-wife. I think my ex-wife was seeing that perhaps I was not that bad of an option, and things are not always greener on the other side. With me, she had a solid man who put her and the kids first. I was a good husband, and perhaps she had made a really poor decision. She did call me several times to lament about her life, but I told her that I was not the person to talk with about this. She answered that I had been her best friend, and she could always talk to me about anything. I told her that had been true, but things had changed and I did not feel comfortable being part of the discussion, and she needed to work things out on her own with her new partner. I did not want to be involved in her relationships and had no interest in hearing about her relationship with her new boyfriend. She did agree, but I think that I could sense some hurt and regret in her voice when she hung up after I told her this. One night she had the kids over at her apartment with her dirtbag boyfriend to have a sleepover and watch some movies. That evening I had an upset call from her. Apparently, this guy had drank too much and was frustrated that the kids did not want to watch one of his shows. I am not sure what the show was, but the kids apparently had no interest. So, he got mad and slapped my youngest daughter because he thought she was being snotty. This was a hard slap and left a mark on her cheek. So, I get a call and went right over there. My first inclination was to call the cops, and maybe I should have, but I did go over there to get my kids. I should not laugh, but what I did to him still makes me smile. The guy was very good looking and was very fit. However, he was not a large man by anybody's standard. I should note that I am a large and strong man with years of military experience and knew how to take care of myself. So, I took him by the neck with my left hand and grabbed his right hand. I then proceeded to work him over pretty good with his own hand while telling him at the same time, "Hey, why are you hitting yourself?" My older brother had done this to me many a time when I was a kid. I had also seen this done in the military one time, and that is where I got the idea. I think it was a fitting way to address the situation. It was very humiliating for him. I then took my kids and left. I told him that if I heard anything else from him about this, my next call would be to the cops and then he would have real trouble. That is the last thing I wanted to do, since that would have also caused problems for my ex-wife and me, since she was really in no position to deal with more trouble. I do admit that I got some real pleasure out of telling my ex-wife off with a very snide comment, and so this is what you left me for. She did not say anything, but did hang her head. I think she was ashamed of what had taken place. I am not sure if that meant she regretted the divorce, but I do think she realized what she had done and was regretful. Lo and behold, later that night, I get a knock at the door and there she is sobbing and was very upset. I did let her come in, and she told me that she had broken up with her boyfriend and wanted to come home. Now, I thought long and hard for several minutes and told her that I loved her. We had history, but I would not be a backup since her relationship failed and I could not go back. With everything that had taken place, I did not think it was a good idea for her to come back, and there were just too many sad memories. That being said, I would never have left the mother of my children alone on the street. She did come in, and she did call her parents. I took her there to stay. My former father-in-law met me at the door and thanked me. He told me that I had been a good man and a good husband. He appreciated that I had put the kids first and did look after the safety of his daughter as my ex-wife. I did tell him that I would always love his daughter. Maybe things did not go the way we wanted, but I would not let harm come to her. To this day, I am proud of what I did on this night and what I decided to do to protect my kids. And in the end, my ex-wife, she lived at her parents' house for about a year until she could get back on her feet. She did get a good job in meeting and event planning, actually with my help and contacts, and moved into her own place. It was to my kids' benefit that she had a solid and stable job. I have to admit, though, that I was very jealous at times of her new condo since she had access to a really nice swimming pool. It was minutes from my house, and my kids spent many a hot afternoon at her place and in that pool. She was always a good mother, and her old vitality and spark returned. It was not perfect, but there was some sense of normalcy. She did have a string of relationships that did not go anywhere, and I think she was taken advantage of several times. For some reason, she had a propensity for guys who were good-looking, but were dirtbags. I never understood the attraction to the bad boy, and my ex-wife was a case study in why these guys seem to be losers. She always seemed to be dealing with loaning money to these guys, being part of a love triangle, and are just generally dealing with a lot of bad situations. Several times, she would say to me that I was the best relationship she ever had and nobody else could compare. Maybe that was a lot of cheap talk, but I did like to hear it. I did upset her one time when she said to me that I was her greatest relationship and she made a mistake to let it go. I think she was trying to be sincere and wanted to see if there was a chance for her and me to get back together again. She was then seriously infuriated when I told her that maybe if I would have been more of a dirtbag, mistreated her, cheated on her, abused her, and generally took advantage of her, she would not have run off with another man. I told her that she almost seemed to enjoy being somebody's doormat, spittoon, piggy bank, crutch, and armchair. She did not speak to me for almost a month after that, but I admit that I enjoyed it and the impact it had on her. After a month, we did talk again as before, and she laughed about the situation. She told me that unfortunately what I said about her taste in men, besides myself, seemed to be sadly true. All that being said, nothing romantic happened again between us, and I retained a cordial and respectful relationship with her. I believe that I could have been with her again if I wanted, but would not take that step even though she did drop hints and suggestions on a consistent basis. In my heart, I wanted to, but was basically scared of being hurt again. I did date a number of women and do not claim to have lived my life as a monk after my divorce. I did fine, but was busy with work and my kids. Also at that time, most of the single women my age, 30 plus at that time, were also divorced with kids and had family drama of their own. I had a couple of experiences at that time with dating and divorce women that I think justified my approach. I was not going to bring women home to the house with my kids there if I was not serious about the person. I dated some really nice and attractive women, but I did not want to go to the next level. Several of them wanted more from me, but I was not going to go there. I was focused on work, my kids, and had really no interest in another marriage or a long-term relationship. Maybe I was being selfish, but I just did not want to deal with it. So, I never got too serious even when I had the chance to. Several of them accused me of playing a game and leading them on, but I was always upfront with them. I would be lying if I said that my past feelings for my ex-wife did not have some impact. I just did not want to take that step for something more serious. I felt that I had already went down that path and got hosed. So, why do it again? It is so different nowadays. I wish back then I could have gone on a website, posted my photo, and swiped to find somebody interested. It was a different time, maybe not better, but was just different in regard to relationships. The bottom line for me was there were just too many bad memories, and I decided that going solo was the best route for me. What was satisfying for me, though, is that my ex-wife would routinely ask my kids for an update if she thought I was dating somebody. They really could not tell her anything since I did not bring any of these ladies around the house for the reasons noted above. She would get frustrated and several times ask me for an update. I would change the subject to her great frustration and end the discussion with a chuckle and a comment. I am doing fine from the romance perspective and have no issues or complaints with my personal life. One night, I had a date with a very attractive and fit woman that had been a setup organized by a wife of a friend. We were sitting in a restaurant enjoying the date. Then, in comes my ex-wife with several of her girlfriends. We did not see each other right away because I am sure she would have walked right out if she did. She went to the restroom and then saw me at a table. I was very pleased to be sitting with such an attractive woman, and I could tell that it shocked and upset my ex-wife. Soon after she saw me, I did see her and her friends get up and leave the restaurant. The next day, I got a call from her asking for information on who I was out with. She did comment on my date's beauty, fitness, and that I must be proud of myself since I had obviously moved on to something better. My answer once again was the same as before. I am doing fine from the romance perspective and have no issues or complaints with my personal life. Maybe I was being petty, but I felt great about this situation for days after. I should note that one of the most impactful situations for us took place when I was recalled back to active duty to serve in Iraq in 2004 to 2005. I, of course, was not happy with the recall since I had served my time on active duty and spent another 18 years in the reserve. I thought I was through with my service time, was getting to retire from the reserve, but I had made my commitment and had to meet my obligations. My ex-wife was very scared for me at the time. I had also been recalled back to active duty for the first Gulf War, and she was well aware of what I would be up against. She tried to talk to me about our past relationship before I left and potentially getting together again, but I just did not need to deal with that kind of drama. I did tell her that I was happy she was there, she was back to normal, and I knew that she would take good care of the kids with help from both sets of grandparents. During my deployment, my ex-wife probably had written to me a dozen times and had sent me several packages. At the time, I could not deal with the drama, and I had to keep my mind straight. There had also been a group picture of my unit in a news magazine, and I was in the photo also. It was rough living, and I did not look like the epitome of cleanliness and health in the photo. Apparently, this photo greatly moved her when she saw it, and was very scared for me. Obviously, it was a tough time for me also, but I just did not have the time or desire to deal with issues that would distract me. As a result, and perhaps a sense of petty payback, I never opened or read one single letter from her. I tossed all her letters and the packages right into the trash, and kept all thoughts about her out of my mind. I did write my kids on a regular basis, and they wrote to me. Several of their letters addressed the hurt my ex-wife was feeling due to my non-response, but there was no way I wanted that kind of drama in my life at that time. As a result, I never wrote her back. When I came home, after just around a year, I did see my ex-wife at a family welcome home event. I was really chagrined my parents invited her, but I went with the flow. She had learned about the event and asked them if she could come. The reality, though, is that my love for her had never died, and seeing her was always painful for me. I had a hard time getting past what had happened before, and the bottom line is, I was just afraid. So, during the event, she pulled me to the side and told me that she was very hurt and surprised that I never wrote her back, or at least sent her a note thanking her for the cookies and cake that she sent me. I told her straight out that I never read anything she sent me, and I tossed the packages she sent without opening them. I told her we had been through for years. I did not ask her to write me. The whole situation was still sad and raw for me, and I did not need to have any drama, and especially her, in my life. I then told her that she knew we needed to work together for our kids. I would be civil to her, would look to make sure she had help with our kids, and make sure she and the kids were protected. But I didn't lie when I told her that I had no interest in any relationship with her outside of our kids. I noted earlier that she looked regretful when I signed the divorce paperwork, but I think what I told her on this day completely stunned her. She told me later that this moment really shook her. Her ex-husband was deployed to a very dangerous place. People were literally fighting for their lives. He did not want to hear from her and could not be bothered to even look at what she sent. She told me that this really shook her, was deeply hurtful, cut her deep to the core, and made her really think about the long-term impact and consequences of what happened. Looking back, I am very ashamed of how I handled this situation. I wrote back to anybody who sent me something, but I could not reciprocate to my ex-wife. It is not one of my greatest moments, and I am not proud of what I did. I told my ex-wife this soon after the initial discussion, and noted that I felt great shame for how I acted to her. The truth, which I did not tell her, is that I did not respond, because I still loved her and was afraid because of what had happened before. All that being said, we did have a good working relationship. Things are never perfect, and we are not perfect people. We did work well together to raise our kids, and we were a very good team when it came to our kids. She was at the house so often to see her kids that I almost felt like telling her that she should move in. I do think that if I had suggested it, she would have moved in right away. When my daughters hit their teenage years, she was an integral part of their lives. I did my best, but I think a mother can handle some situations better than a father. She dealt with my daughters on breakups with boyfriends, crushes, womanly issues. My ex-wife did a masterful job in handling these issues in situations with empathy, patience, and pure motherly love. She was always there for them. My admiration did grow for her when I saw how skilled she was in helping the kids make the right choices. One of my daughters at one time got involved with somebody who I thought was a proverbial dirtbag. I am not sure what happened, but my wife talked to her. Apparently, she told my daughter of her own choices and the impact from them. The good news is that the dirtbag was quickly jettisoned, and I breathed a sigh of relief. To this day, I really regret that we were not together as a family during this time. I just did not have the courage and fortitude to give our relationship a shot. So many of the Reddit stories seem to push for ongoing and eternal revenge and payback. I just do not think that does anything positive for anybody in the long run. My wife had apologized to me many times and made overtures on getting back together over the years. One time she tearfully asked me how many times she would have to atone and keep paying for her mistakes, and that she had now been paying the price for over 20 years. But I must be honest and admit that it was simply my personal fear, pride, and need for petty payback that did not allow me to take that step forward. I should have just faced the fact that she is not perfect. I am not perfect and she made a bad mistake, but I did not have the guts to give it another shot. I was just too afraid to do so. The years did fly by. My kids did well, attended college, had good careers, got married, and started families. I would still see my ex-wife at family events on a regular basis. She would always ask me if I was seeing anybody, and it would always come around the hints asking if there was still a chance for us to get back together. I always told her no, because in life some things stick and you cannot go away from them. She would always look sad and told me that her decision to leave me was the worst decision and mistake she ever made. She told me there is not a day that goes by when she does not think about what if. I would be lying if I said that I did not have similar feelings, but I was too scared to tell her or give it a chance and see what would happen. She also told me it was especially hard for her at events like weddings, birthday parties, and other family events. She told me that the toughest days for her from this perspective was at the funerals for her mother and father when they died. She was happy when she saw me there, but greatly saddened since I was not there as her husband and partner to support her at such a difficult moment of her life. She knew that I was a strong man and good husband to her, but on these days she felt alone and had felt great regret. Of interest is that I talked to my father-in-law shortly before he died at a family-related event for his grandchildren. Despite everything that had happened, I always had a strong relationship with my former in-laws. The talk was interesting. He told me that he knew from the way that I looked at his daughter that my love for her had never died. His wife had passed away, but told me that they had been a complete team and always would be. He told me that maybe I should forget the past and see where things could go in the future. He did chuckle a little when he told me that what in the hell did you really have to lose? I really liked that man and miss him to this day. My wife also told me she really felt this way, regret, sadness, and what if at the weddings for both of our children and the birth of our grandchildren, she thought there would have been great days that we should have shared together. She asked me if I ever felt the same way. My answer had always been evasive and that the divorce experience was sad for me, but I decided to move forward and not look back. I did tell her that I felt her regret was ironic since she was so sure that true happiness was with her new boyfriend and they were such an exciting power couple. She never liked to hear that and would get upset if I mentioned it to her. Recently, I had an experience with a coworker. I was surprised to learn that my situation was not as rare as I thought it was. A guy I worked with had a similar experience, but he was the cheater. It dealt with the death of his son in an auto accident. He could not handle it. A part of him died with his son. He could not come back from it and started blaming his wife. I could not understand it, but he somehow put his grief on his wife. Then he got into this something is missing in my life approach and took up with another woman. I could not understand that one either. He gave up his wife of 20 plus years for a person he had met for one night on a business trip. He also made a bad move as he got divorced, remarried, and divorced again in less than 5 years. I had lunch with him one day and I was shocked when he told me that he is dating his first ex-wife again. They have such history and chemistry. She had forgiven him, and it was going great. Then I was even more shocked to learn they had remarried through a destination wedding with their families and were back together again. One thing I have learned is that some people have a very hard time when dealing with really traumatic situations. Instead of facing it, they try to block it by thinking they can hide from it. I believe that this is exactly what happened with my ex-wife. I admit that this situation with my work colleague really caused me to take a step back and really think about my life and the relationship with my ex-wife. We are both now pushing past 60 and I was thinking about hanging it up at work, doing some consulting on the side and moving somewhere warm or at least for the cold months. Between part-time work, my consulting jobs, savings for a 1K, future work pension, military reserve pension, future social security, and some inheritance. I am doing or will be doing pretty darn well. My kids honor and support me and do love their mother. The last time I talked to my ex-wife before moving was at a birthday party for one of our grandchildren. She asked to speak to me alone, and we stepped outside. She then became very emotional and upset, perhaps more upset than I had ever seen her before. She sobbed and then told me she always thought there was a chance that we would get back together. My moving away would signify the absolute end and that she had experienced a lifetime of regret for having failed as a wife. I told her so many years had gone past and that she should not feel that way. I have nothing but respect and admiration for her. I told her she faced some tough times, but had really rebuilt her life. She was a great mother, a wonderful grandmother, had a great career, and had been a great friend to many people, including me. She should not dwell on one issue that had taken place so many years before. I had long ago let it go and suggested that she needed to do the same. She then continued to cry and ask if I really thought it was possible to let such a huge mistake go by, and she was very sorry for her betrayal of me and the impact on our family. She told me that she still did not fully understand why she did what she did and thought about it all the time. She did not recognize that person from so many years ago. I know it sounds like a dramatic television moment, but it was even deeper to me when it happened. She composed herself, took my hands, looked me in the eyes, and asked if she could potentially come visit me. I told her that I did not know, but would think about it. I admit that every single time I looked into her beautiful green eyes, my heart would always melt. Today was no exception. On this day, she looked exceptionally beautiful to me, and the years have been very kind to her. On this day, I must admit that regardless of what had taken place before, I never felt more intense love for her than I did. On this day, at this moment in time, perhaps it does not make sense, but the heart feels what it feels, and time for me seemed to have stopped, and we were back to when we had just met. She then really kissed me in a romantic manner for the first time in almost 30 years. I would be lying if I did not admit that I wanted her back in my life more than anything at that moment. I somehow maintained my cool. I told her that I would need to think about the whole situation and what I needed to do. The whole conversation and situation resonated in my head, and I thought about it again and again. At this point in my life, I thought that maybe I would welcome having a relationship with her again. I would not get remarried, but what did I really have to lose at this point? The words and insight of my past father-in-law did continue to ring in my head. She did make me happy at one time, and my love for her had never went away. At this point of time in our lives, maybe we can go forward. So, I am semi-retired, rent my house to my youngest daughter for next to nothing and maintenance, and have been living in the Carolinas. COVID is interesting since it allowed me to move away, but still work for the company out of the house on a part-time basis. I am doing some consulting on the side and will start drawing my work pension soon. Basically, I am sitting pretty. So, I really thought about it, and my ex-wife did come to see me after I told her that I would like for her to come down and visit. Crazy, I know, but all that old feelings are still there. She stayed at my place, and we went and did many things together. I am pleased to report that since we are older, but learned that we still do well together with what I call that special time. She was there for a weekend, but it stretched into 2 weeks and then into over a month. I never said it, but I did not want her to leave. I felt like it was meant to be. One night, as her time to go back home was getting close, she started to cry and sob because of what happened literally years ago. She told me that the past several weeks had brought her great happiness, and she was so sorry for what happened. She told me that she constantly thought about what if and if she had wasted her life for some type of utopian relationship that cannot exist. I thought about it and decided, right at that moment, that it was time for me to forget the past, step up, and make the move I had thought about for years. I then told her that was all in the past and maybe the time had come for us to move on and reconsider having a future together. I then reached down, put aside my fear, and finally found my courage. I told her the real absolute truth is that I always loved her. My feelings for her had never died. My love for her was even stronger, and maybe she would like to be with me permanently. She had a look of shock on her face when I said this. She took my hands and asked if I was indeed serious or if this was just a spur of the moment decision. I told her it was indeed made as a spur of the moment decision, but I had thought about this for a long time, for years even, and I was serious. I told her that if she stayed, I would never let her out of my life again. I told her that I was not sure about marriage again, but did it really make a difference at this point in our lives? She agreed. She never left my home and things have been going great. The kids had a look of absolute shock on their faces when we told them over a virtual phone call. I never thought I would be talking about my personal life over a virtual phone call, but they were very happy for us. My youngest daughter, though, told me she was not really surprised because she knew that my love for her mother had never died and she had a feeling that things were not truly over. The current status is that things are still going very well, and we have no complaints. I am not claiming perfection, but we are doing well as a couple and are very happy. I think the biggest issue we run into is my wife continues to lament about her choices from almost 30 years ago. I told her the past is the past at this point, and I really do not want to relive what happened in 1997. 1998. We have had a great family, ran into some problems, but things are going well now. But she still feels that she has to continue proving herself to me, and I told her that is no longer important. She knows of my love for her. She needs to forget the past, and we need to look to the future. She also wants to show me that she is total transparency. I told her that I have zero interest in checking her phone, social media. She is into social media, but social media to me is a crock, and I could care less about it. I trust her and will not hold a situation from almost 30 years ago against her at this point. She understands, but for some reason still feels she must prove herself. It is not a big deal, but does come up on a semi-regular basis. That situation, though, is also getting better as time goes on, and she is more secure in our relationship. One recent thing happened that did really surprise me. My wife came to me and told me she needed to tell me something that I did not know, but she wanted to move forward with complete honesty. I was like, okay, now what? But she was embarrassed and ashamed to tell me then that she had actually been married for a short period of time to the dirtbag boyfriend. They went to Vegas after our divorce to have a quick and somewhat secret wedding. I did not know. Her parents did not know at the time, and to this day, our kids do not know. However, the marriage, to no surprise, quickly imploded due to his drinking, scumbag behavior, and then culminated with the slapping incident at the apartment. That is when she realized she needed to get out. My wife was quite surprised at my reaction when she told me she thought that I would be upset and hurt, but instead I began to chuckle, laugh, poured a nice cold beer, and went to get our pizza that had been baking in the oven. I told her it had been so many years ago, and I found the whole situation to be pretty much bizarre, ludicrous, and humorous at this point. She was surprised at my basic reaction of who really freaking cares at this point. I did tell her that I could never understand why such a smart lady got so involved with a guy who could only be described as a pretty clown. Then we had another strange anomaly take place several weeks after the discussion on the secret quick wedding in Las Vegas. We ran into the first wife of the pretty clown down along the beach. She was there on vacation with her husband, now adult children, and her grandchildren. I cannot say she was overly pleased to see my ex-wife, but was happy to see me, and we did talk for a period of time. My ex-wife had not seen or talked to her pretty clown ex-husband in many years. She did know that he moved to Las Vegas himself, had opened several eateries, but that was about all. The short story is that he had done well in the restaurant business despite his idiocy, but he was now basically drinking himself to death. Nobody could do anything to help him, and he did not have much longer. He also apparently had a string of marriages to younger women who divorced him after relatively short periods of time, took him for a lot of his money, and he was basically going to die broke and alone. It sounded like a pretty grim story. My ex-wife, now back with me as my partner, tried to hide her sadness, but I could tell she was upset about this. I showed some empathy and told her it is natural to feel sadness for somebody you cared for. We kept an eye on the obituaries, since his last name was unique and knew he did not have long. My ex-wife, now partner, and I talked. She did write him a letter to what she thought was his address, but never heard back from him. He then died about 6 weeks after we had talked to his first ex-wife. His obituary notice posted by the funeral home sounded sad. It basically read that he was successful in business, but there was no mention of children or any type of family. There was a picture of him from his later years, and I was shocked when I saw the toll his poor life choices had taken on him. He had been a very handsome man in his youth, but many years of booze and abuse had eaten him to the bone. He was a shell, at best, of the person I remembered. I knew that his parents were long dead and later learned he was estranged from his family altogether. He was cremated, no family came out, there was no memorial service, and that was that. It was a pretty sad story since he died alone. He traveled a rough road, and I am thankful that I did not go down that path. However, I did slip up here and admit to talking out of both sides of my mouth on letting go of the past, in this instance, at least. I had consistently told my wife the past did not matter anymore. That was almost always true for me, but this situation caused me to relive some bad memories. This was the last time that I ever did something to my ex-wife from the perspective of revenge and petty payback. After learning all this about the pretty clown, I could not resist, and did tell her, wow, do you see what you could have had if you stayed with him? A lifetime of his abuse, drinking, and womanizing. What a great decision you made to leave me, divorce, and marry him. She was shook up at what I said, and was deeply hurt. I immediately knew what I did was wrong, and apologized to her. I told her I was wrong to bring this up to hurt her, and use it as a weapon. I promised her then and there that I would never use the past again like this in a hurtful manner, and I have kept that promise. I should note the movie night slapping incident is also probably the one thing that really upsets my wife. We can discuss other things rationally, but this incident causes her to get very upset and almost hysterical. It has been so many years, but she has a hard time accepting that this guy hit her daughter, and she could not stop him. I mentioned the incident early on when she originally came down to see me. It was an entire night of crying, shaking, and apologies. Obviously, this is not something I want to experience again, so I personally have not mentioned it again and have no interest in doing so ever again. After all this recent drama, and in the end, we did recently get remarried in a small chapel with our family there to witness the ceremony. At this point, we did not see any value in a legal marriage, but it was important to both of us that our relationship be renewed in the eyes of God. Perhaps an outmoded sentiment, but one that I think is important. I did think a lot about that day and our vows from so many years before. What God has put together, let no man put asunder. Perhaps we had always been meant to be together, and this was just a resumption of what had always been meant to be. I do believe in free will, but I do believe that some things maybe are also just meant to be. Some people reading this may think I am crazy for doing this again after so many years, but at this point in our lives, there is only love and respect. What happened so many years ago is in the past. Now, when I see my wife, and I must admit to myself that I always considered her to be my wife, I only feel love and affection. I think things will get even better, and hopefully we will have good years ahead. As we head into old age, she really made a bad decision so many years ago, but that is in the past. I think we both face the consequences, but I look forward to life and moving forward. Perhaps it is hokey, but one thing is important to me. I always thought we were writing a book together, but was saddened that we would never get a chance to finish it. I am pleased that we now have another chance to finish writing that book, and including the final chapters. Many people have asked if I ever went for counseling or therapy. The answer is a resounding no. I know some people benefit from counseling and therapy, but it is not for me. Some people told me this was a mistake, but I disagree. I believe that I am a strong man and did not believe that this would benefit me in addressing this situation. I did not cheat and always maintained my moral compass. Perhaps it was a mistake, but I have come a long way without that kind of assistance. I do think about it though and wonder if effective counseling would have encouraged me to make a move earlier, but that is something that we will never know. My wife did go for counseling numerous times to figure out what she called her hidden issues. I admit to not understanding the whole aspect of counseling and do not need somebody to tell me how I feel or help me figure out the rationale for decisions that I made. I know why I did what I did. I may not always be proud of my decisions, but I know why I made them and what drove them. My wife told me after many counseling visits that to this day, she still does not fully understand why she did what she did. She basically thinks the miscarriage and the depression caused her to make short-term decisions without considering the long-term consequences. I already knew that in my mind 30 years ago, but do support my wife in trying to move herself forward. I admit that when we talk about these kinds of issues, I always try to look attentive and be supportive, but the reality is in the back of my mind, I am trying to figure out who will be in my starting lineup for fantasy football. All that being said, let me point out again that I love my wife with passion. I always put my family first, and I am thankful to have her back in my life. We are not perfect, but we are now, as my reinstated deceased father-in-law calls it, a complete team. And I think we always will be. Would my wife cheat again? I do not think she would at this stage of our lives, but age, maturity, and experience has shown me that all people are mixed back. There is good and bad in all of us, and one action or decision does not make or break a person. I have regrets also. My regret is that I always loved my wife and I let sad feelings dictate what I decided to do. Maybe I should have just recognized the fact that she is a human being and made a bad decision. Perhaps I should have given this a shot earlier, and things might have been better. I do think about what if also, but I'm glad we have this second chance. With that, let me conclude, and hopefully I have a different perspective that some of you will be able to consider. If you found this story gripping, please like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible tales. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is an emotional roller coaster about a husband uncovering his wife's betrayal and the explosive aftermath. I'm a 40-year-old man working as a finance manager at a local bank in a mid-sized town. My days are filled with numbers reports and managing a small team living in a community where people know each other. I've settled into a comfortable routine. My home is a modest house in a neighborhood filled with familiar faces. I find joy in small things. The laughter of friends during weekend get-togethers, the excitement in my children's eyes during family game nights, and the satisfaction of tending to my garden, the stability of my job, and the predictability of my life have brought a sense of contentment. Bills are paid on time. Vacations are planned well in advance, and every day follows a familiar pattern. While others might find this routine dull, for me, it's a haven. It's a life built on hard work and consistent choices, reflecting values like responsibility, integrity, and dedication to family. Over the span of 15 years, our marriage was punctuated by important milestones. There were anniversaries celebrated with quiet dinners and surprise trips, the birth of our children, and the triumph of overcoming challenges like job changes and health scares. These events served as markers of our journey, each one a testament to our life and the love we believed would endure. Our shared accomplishments were not just personal, but also professional. We cheered for each other's career advancements and supported each other through decisions like moving to our mid-sized town for my stable job. We took pride in small victories too, like paying off our first car, renovating our home, or planning a family vacation abroad. Our marriage was not without its trials. We faced financial pressures, disagreements over parenting, and the regular stresses of daily life, but every storm was weathered together hand in hand. Even when it seemed insurmountable, these trials were woven into the fabric of our relationship, each one strengthening our resolve and reinforcing our belief in one another. Despite the ups and downs, there was a profound sense of contentment. We had built something solid, something that felt unbreakable. We laughed together, cried together, and faced the world together. I held an unwavering belief that whatever lay ahead, we would conquer it together. Our love was tested time and time again, and we had always emerged stronger. Looking back at those years, everything seemed to click. Our dreams were coming true. Our love was growing, and the future looked bright. We believed in us, in what we had, and what we could achieve. Over time, subtle shifts began to creep into our marriage. Once clear lines of communication seemed to blur, conversations that used to flow effortlessly became stilted. Smiles that came easily were replaced with blank stares. Arguments became more frequent. At first, they were about trivial things like household chores or plans for the weekend, but gradually they became more intense and lingering, exposing underlying issues we had never faced before. A detachment grew between us, a widening gap that seemed impossible to bridge. I started feeling like a bystander in my marriage, watching as something precious slipped away. Even when we were together, her mind seemed far away. The dreams and plans we shared were replaced with a silence that was both deafening and confusing. My wife's job as a pharmaceutical rep had always been demanding, but now it seemed to consume her. The late-night calls, the long trips away from home, and the constant stress started to take a toll on us both. I found myself growing uneasy about her frequent travels. Questions began to form in my mind. Why were there so many late-night meetings? Why did she seem so distant? Even when she was home, I tried to understand to believe that this was just a phase, that the woman I had married was still there behind the demands of her job and the strains of daily life. But doubts began to grow, feeding on the small changes and the growing unease. Something was off, and though I couldn't put my finger on it, the feeling was impossible to shake off. My wife's job as a pharmaceutical rep was more than just a career to her. It was a calling. She had an uncanny ability to connect with clients, to understand their needs, and to represent her products with a genuine passion. Over the years, she climbed the ranks, becoming one of the top reps in her company. Her success was a source of pride for both of us, reflecting her hard work, intelligence, and dedication. Her role required frequent travel to different cities, meeting with healthcare providers, attending conferences, and networking events. The glamorous hotels and business dinners were part of her world. One that was exciting, but also demanding. Late nights, early flights, and the constant pressure to perform were all part of the package. Her phone was never off. Her email was never closed, and her suitcase was always packed for the next trip. While I admired her success and celebrated her achievements, there was a part of me that was concerned about the toll her career was taking on our relationship. The long hours, the weekends away, the constant juggling of her professional and personal life. It all started to add up. I found myself missing the woman who used to put us first, who used to have time for our dreams and our life together. My pride in her accomplishments was tinged with a longing for the connection we once had. Her success was not the problem. It was the growing distance. The feeling that her job was not just a part of her life, but had become the entirety of her life. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that the balance we had once maintained so effortlessly had shifted. Her career was thriving, but at what cost to us? I tried to be supportive, to understand, but the doubts and fears lingered, hinting at something deeper, something that neither of us was willing to face. It was a Sunday like any other. With my wife away on another business trip, I decided to tackle some cleaning, something to keep my mind occupied and the loneliness at bay while rummaging through a drawer filled with forgotten gadgets and tangled cords. My fingers stumbled upon an old iPad. It was the one my wife used to use before upgrading to a newer model covered in dust. It screamed dull and lifeless. It seemed like a relic of another time. I decided to charge the old iPad. Maybe there were pictures on it. Memories of happier times, something to fill the silence of the empty house. The iPad charged. I sat down to explore its contents, expecting nothing more than a trip down memory lane. Well, what I got was something completely different. As I navigated through old photos and forgotten apps, a notification caught my eye: unopened messages. Intrigued, I opened the messaging app and my heart stopped. Messages from two different men filled with words that tore through me like knives, intimate conversations, plans, explicit photos, secrets, all laid bare in cold digital text. The truth was unmistakable. My wife had cheated. I spent the rest of the night reeling, lost in a haze of confusion and grief. How had this happened? How had I not seen it? How could the woman I loved, the woman I had built my life with, betray me in this way? The following days were a blur of emotion and confusion. The evidence was there, undeniable, but confronting my wife, The woman I had loved and trusted for 15 years was a task I dreaded. I knew that I had to face her to demand answers, but how does one prepare for a conversation that will undoubtedly shatter everything? She returned from her business trip, weary, but smiling, unaware of what was about to hit her. Her cheerful greeting stuck in my throat as I faced her, the iPad in hand, with anger and disbelief. I asked her outright, showed her the messages, and watched her face turn from confusion to realization. And then to a desperate panic. She began to apologize profusely, tears streaming down her face, her words, a torrent of excuses, explanations, and pleas for forgiveness. She claimed it meant nothing, that it was a mistake, that she loved me. Still, her words, once so comforting, didn't mean to me. Now her apologies seemed rehearsed. Her excuses feeble. She wanted to try marriage counseling to work things out, but I could only see the betrayal. I told her, no, my decision was final. I could not forget. I could not forgive. The trust that had been the bedrock of our relationship was gone, destroyed by her actions. She continued to plead, to beg. Even as I walked away, she was super desperate, but it was too late. The damage was done, and there was no turning back. The decision was made, but the path ahead was fraught with complexity and emotional turmoil. I began the process of seeking legal counsel, navigating the labyrinthine legal system, and facing the reality of disentangling our lives. The logistics were overwhelming, but the emotional toll was even greater. The divorce proceedings were painful and draining. There were assets to be divided, agreements to be reached. And every step was a reminder of the betrayal and the love lost despite her pleas for reconciliation. My wife was compliant in the legal process. She wasn't seeking alimony, and she seemed resigned to the divorce, even though her eyes still held a glimmer of hope. The day of the divorce hearing arrived, a somber occasion that marked the end of a 15-year journey. In that courtroom, we faced each other, no longer husband and wife, but adversaries in a legal battle. My wife's plea for reconciliation persisted. Even there, her voice broke as she asked the judge for more time, a chance to save the marriage, but it was too late. The judge ordered us to split all assets. And my 15 years of marriage was over just like that. To this day, I still haven't told our kids, who were in college, that was agreed upon until they come home for break. About 7 months after the divorce, we sold the house and split the equity. Even at the closing, so many months after the divorce, my ex-wife was still trying to get back with me. I simply told her, no chance in hell that was happening. This happened 18 months ago. Our kids know now, and they wanted to know what happened. And I told them to say they were devastated was an understatement. We have a son and a daughter anyway, they are coping. And I want to thank everyone who has taken the time to read this. If this story gripped you, please like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible tales. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Until next time, stay strong.